I'm here today with Michael Street, the man who Forbes called the investor and corporate advisor. Also the man whose tweet got liked by Elon Musk with over 27 million views. He bought his first company at 20. He did deals in over 10 services, 10 countries, and 12 industries. So Michael, I'm super glad you're here today.
Great introduction, and it's great to see you as always.
So I want to kick it off by first thing asking you, you recently sold a business, a new business. So I wanted to share, if you could share with us, like, what are some highlights of that?
Yeah, so it's interesting. I see so much of the sort of entrepreneurial advice world. There's so much about starting a business and so much about building a business and marketing and that sort of thing. There's not too much about selling a business. But in reality, you look at most entrepreneurs who are genuinely wealthy and not just have a lot of employees, etc. Like they've got net worth in the bank and are on the Forbes list. Those are from exit events, either selling a business or IPOing a business. And an IPO is, of course, just selling part of your business on the open market, even if it's 5%, 10%. So, yeah, I've had one or two exit events in my life before, but this is the first one where it's seven-figure sale. I've had six-figure exits before, and the final price was 1.2 million pounds, British pounds, the Queen's English pounds. And basically, it was a real estate developer in the north of England. And the first aspect of that I bought about 5 years ago. It was one of my first acquisition deals. At the time, I didn't really know how to buy businesses. I didn't really know it was a business art form in and of itself. But then I realized that, frankly, the quickest way to grow is by leapfrogging yourself, where you're already at a 100-meter race and you just step in at the 80-meter mark. Because that's what happens when you buy a business. They've already set up the basics, got some employees, got a brand, a little bit of revenue. Although when I was buying it, these were distressed six-figure developers. So very moderate amount of revenue, but you know what I mean. You still have the first initial steps to a business. And then just improve from
Right.
there, build it out and sell it. These things aren't a quick process. So it took 5 years of building it, and the sales process actually took more or less a year. So I had it on the market for 6 months and
Yep.
had a deal that fell through. Deals fell through 3 times actually. And even with the buyer, it was iffy multiple times over the course of a couple of months. But yeah,
Right.
I mean, there's nothing like an exit event. There's nothing like getting out of debt. And yeah, you just are able to have an amazing strategic rethink. Whereas if it's purely profits, you're still stuck on the sort of hamster wheel of like running the business. You know what I mean? You're stuck in the potentially
Yep.
geographic location. You're stuck in one industry. And I like to get a real bird's eye view, sort of strategic overlook of even if it's making money in a particular business, is this the right business to do? Frankly, there's a lot of traditional industries, like, for example, UK property, which people really put pressure on people going into property, as in like property is a way to wealth. And I disagree with that. It's very, very capital intensive, which takes up a lot of time. It's one of my main rules now I have for starting a new business, which is make sure it's not capital intensive, because otherwise you have to raise a lot of money, you have to raise a lot of debt. I mostly raised it from banks and private investors. And yeah, that being said, a property company can never go to zero, whereas an e-commerce company can, if it's just the ads don't work and the sales don't work. Um, but yeah, so now I'm thinking about my next steps, broad plan. We can look anywhere in the world. We can look any industry to go, um, you know, for now. Ultimately, I'm really committed to make a business based on Daniel Priestley's amazing books, where there's a lifestyle business and a performance business. So basically, he wrote several fascinating books. He wrote Key Person of Influence, 24 Assets, and he basically is a good friend of mine. And he talks about creating a business of under 30 employees that you're passionate about, but doesn't dominate your lifestyle. Okay, you get money and freedom from the business rather than it just being a job. And so that's what I want to do. I want to do something I'm
Interesting.
passionate about. I'm not super passionate about building houses. I got really fatigued by the end of it. One of the reasons why I decided to sell. And even then, one of the things I talk to with business owners is when you have the first idea of selling a business, it's so easy to mentally check out of it. And so to get super demotivated because you've made the decision to sell. And it's very important to keep your mentality the same as when you were building it, because sales take time and it's not guaranteed to go through. So for example, like, you know, my deal fell through a couple of times, but a couple of different buyers. And so you've mentally checked out of business and all of a sudden you're like, oh, so many things to think about when selling a business, really.
Yeah. Very interesting stuff. And I really like the fact that you instantly started by, explaining that there's so many people, agencies, whatever, so much focus in the entrepreneurial field about like building a business and growing, whereas the selling point is a completely different game. Now, what I'm very curious about is how does that initial touch point start? Like if you're selling a company, if you're buying a company, what is that first step? Like, what does that look like? Are you approaching that relationship with the idea of, hey, I'm going to build this? Are you looking for something specific, like you mentioned, distressed companies? Like, what does that look like?
Yeah. So the very first thing I'd say is the best time to prepare is right at the beginning. Like before you even start the company, you should have a roadmap to sale. And essentially, one of the easiest ways of doing that is by having what you'd call a data room from the beginning, which is basically all of your accounts, all of your financial information, all of your assets information, and your analytic information if you're an e-commerce business, all in one sort of platform, whether it's a pile of documents or there's several different platforms that you can use for this. And so basically, whenever someone approaches to invest or what have you, with one click, you've got all the information ready. Which most people, most entrepreneurs, especially solopreneurs, young guys like us, we have sloppy accounts, and it's not run like a major corporation with an accounting department, with an in-house accountant. And so all of a sudden, when you are ready to sell, which is normally when you want to get rid of the business, rather than when it's doing really well, because when it's doing really well, you tell yourself, well, I'm rolling in it. I'm doing great, and I've got to keep this forever. Whereas that's the exact point where you should sell the business, especially if it's your first company
Right.
and your goal is to make money, rather than be the boss. A lot of people want to have a sort of ego status where they want to say they have a lot of employees, all of this sort of stuff. And then the question is, do you want to make money or not? Because if exiting a business and getting a capital event makes you more money than managing the business, then sell. It's simple. And yeah, so get a data room, know your customer on both sides of the equation. So one of the things I talk about, again, with so much information about building a business and, marketing and sales, and it's second nature to have a sort of avatar of what your customer is for your sales and your actual operating business. What you also need is a avatar for the sale of your business itself. So who's going to buy this? What sort of person are they? Yes. What do they
Mhm.
look like? What industry are they in? Is the cash purchase? What multiples do people have? And what do these investors want? Um, Specifically, as well, ultimately, to get a good deal, you should be offering a discount. And the best way to offer a discount is to have massive, massive value. Um, and so psychologically, you're okay with giving that little bit um, in the business.
Yeah. That makes so much sense. And it's very interesting how you approach all of this from the beginning. Like you're very clear on how that data center, the data room,
Massive, yeah.
is like a critical starting point as well as like both sides of the
Yeah.
avatar. So
Now, I didn't do this for my first
now,
business, by the way. This is retrospective
okay.
things of
Right.
the lessons I've
Okay.
learned from it, right? Because you get caught with your pants down.
Hmm.
And again, especially because most business owners sell, it's not actually financial reasons. It's normally because they're tired of the business, or they want to retire, or they want to do something else. They want to travel. They have a different business. They want to do property. It's that sort of thing. And so you're not prepared when most people are just totally unprepared for it. And so they need to run backwards and retroactively do all this stuff that I've been talking about. So the best way to do it is have everything in the beginning. I mean, it's like cleaning your room. You're going to clean your room every day. There's not much to do. If you wait a month, it's going to be a big job. And then you say, oh, well, there's clothes in the corner. It's a big pile. It's, an intimidating pile. And so you're less likely to get it done, and it, spirals. So just get your accounts sorted first.
Yeah.
Have a clean set of accounts. And a lot of the online business marketplaces at the moment, they directly put in your Google account, your Shopify account, and that sort of stuff. So that helps you a load. But if you're in any other business that doesn't have a major platform like that, you need to be able to have a one-click data room, because on top of that, it's very difficult to build trust in the business. People are putting a lot of money into this sale. They're taking a risk. Potentially, they're getting into debt to do it. There's a lot of work to do, and there's a lot of time you need to spend on the buyer's side. So if they ask for some information, and you're like, oh well, let me get that, it basically reduces trust. It has a little bit of a voice
Right.
in the head where they say either something suspicious, worst case scenario, but even the best case scenario is this guy doesn't have his stuff together, and it looks sloppy,
Yeah.
and
That
that
makes so much sense.
lowers the
Yeah.
trust. Yeah. And on top of that, and I also want to make the
Yeah.
point.
I also.
Sorry,
Mhm.
one more thing. I also want to make the point that doing all this sort of stuff will make you a better business manager, because you have a snapshot of all your um, business profits, and specifically you can see what services have higher margin per um, investment and per hour worked. So what's your best return on money in the business? Because it's so easy to get emotionally attached to some things in the business. Like, for example, I had, I spend a lot of time doing tax returns to save money, basically, rather than having a bookkeeper. And that's because property companies, you have loads of different corporations within a property company, which is basically because of how the debt's structured, but that's a totally different issue. But anyway, after looking at it, I realized I'm spending so much time doing these tax returns, it's not making money. It's like a business treading water. It's not an activity that generates income. It's an activity that basically keeps everything alive. And so you should delegate that. So this is the sort of things you
Yeah.
find when you really have a sit down and have the numbers in front of you clearly.
Right. And just circling back to what you started out with here, like Brandon Carter said that if you're not tracking, you're slacking, and I completely agree.
So
If you're not having some sort of baseline of measurement, you're not able to make decisions or like actually reflect on what you're doing. So whether that's like the finance tracker or just even testimonials, if you're not prepared to show those things when it's needed, and if you don't have that internal data to make decisions and to make judgment and things like that, like you can just not be that effective. So it's very interesting to see how you emphasize that in a bigger context of selling. So very nice stuff. Now, next question I want to ask as well is something that really stands out from you is that you're very young. Like, I've known other people in the mergers acquisition. I've worked with clients in that industry, things like that. But it definitely stands out that you're much younger than most people in this age. So it's definitely like, a major accomplishment. Next to that, you work in like many industries, many countries, things like that. Like the fact that you worked in the US, UAE, Singapore, South Africa is very interesting. So my question is, how do you approach and adapt to all those different business culture and market? Like what allows you to really tap into all those different regions?
Yeah, so I've started companies in 4 different continents, and I truly don't recommend that. I really don't think that. I think every
Yep.
entrepreneur has a certain level of ADHD, basically, and I think that I really do believe people should listen to what I'm saying rather than what I'm doing, because I've tried over 50 different businesses over the last 8 years, and the vast majority of them have come to absolutely nothing, over 90%. Like, so for example, you mentioned South Africa one. Yeah, that's true. I did start a company doing different types of commodities trading, physical commodities trading in South Africa, Namibia, Angola, and because I was doing loads of other projects, I didn't spend much time on it. It wasn't my main focus, and so it was a total fiasco. And so I think that
Right.
it's one of the reasons why I looked at all these things, and like, I bought a manufacturing company in the north of England, didn't spend much time on it, and that didn't go anywhere. Many different things. You really do get the most value out of what you focus on. It's one of the reasons why I believe in being super liquid and selling these companies that I think, okay, even if it has equity value, if I don't want to spend my most amount of time on it, I'm not going to have it in my portfolio. It's one of the main reasons why I sold my development company. And so, yeah, I've been all over the world. I want to continue to go all over the world. I've done business all over with incredible numbers of people, and I've got some incredible stories from that. That being said, I don't recommend that. I don't recommend that lifestyle. I recommend you focus. But I do enjoy talking about how business works in different countries. Yeah.
So following up on that, like what is your main go-to route? Because whether it's more like an online agency or even like a physical logistic business, um, would you recommend for businesses to try to seek expansion, like going to other markets, other countries, or would you be more focused on really narrowing down their expertise and like their industry?
This is where having a data room comes in. Well, even totally outside of selling your business, if you have all the data and you can see, like, for example, a discussion, two points, one from my personal experience and one from the news. I once knew a healthcare company that had an amazing core product, right? They basically had great domains in the healthcare space in the UK, and they created profitable websites out of that. And but they were insisting on doing this series of passion projects, pet projects, side projects. And not only that, they were insisting on expanding it into half a dozen countries at once. Huge Canadian expansion, a huge American expansion, and they only had 20 people. And so even though their core service was profitable, overall the company was hemorrhaging money. And that's because they wanted to expand too quickly. Another one, Warren Buffett bought a candy company called See's Candy in about 1972 or whenever it was. And essentially, it was based in California, and it's always been based in California, although I have seen a branch in Dubai. And essentially, there's this amazing video from Warren Buffett where he says, I've owned this company for 50 years. And every couple of years, we get a lot of profit, a lot of cash flow, and we decide to expand into other states. And every single time we do, there's something about these new states that aren't nearly as successful as California. And so they always retreat back down there. So not only have they not expanded much, this company from Buffett, they also have barely increased the volume of chocolate that they produce every year. But because the price incrementally goes up every single year since the 1970s, and they're just efficiently run company, that business, I think they spent 20 million on it and it returned 2 billion over the last 50 years. And that's with no international expansion and almost no volume expansion. And so the question again is, what did you start this thing for? Is it to have a multinational business? Or is it to make cash? Because if it's the latter, which I think it is for most people, just stick to what works, basically.
I love that. Very powerful, and the story is amazing. So, next thing as well, what I'm very interested about, and which is kind of like the whole topic, and I don't want to dive too much into it, but I do want to have your stake. So, from your level, what do you see are like some of the industries that really will undergo the biggest transformation? I've been very active in logistics myself, and I know that the majority of people are actually employed in logistics, whether it's direct transportation, distribution centers, things like that. And that's an industry where, the automations will replace so many jobs. But what do you think are some of these other industries, and what do you think is realistic? Because I don't think that everything will happen in 1 year. And from my experience, if you want to improve like a certain part of your business or a certain part of your actual operations, you always want to identify one process and automate that or replace that or delegate that. And I think if you're looking at a big scale of automations, it will also happen in such a way where everything will go in certain phases. So what is your take on that? Like, what do you think is realistic for what we can expect with all these big, massive automations, as well as some, industries that you think will really be the first ones to undergo that transformation?
I think there's going to be so much massive change. I'd like to make a point about logistics companies. It's not just about the automation. It's when you combine that with a deglobalizing world, that basically means a lot of routes are going to be shut down. And then the routes that remain are going to have a massive price hike. And so a lot of these companies are going to make so much money. A big set of companies in the space now is got a guy called Brad Jacobs, basically buys a load of logistics companies. He created this company called XPO Logistics, and I think they bought 500 logistics companies. And what they use with that scale is they're putting their cash into AI and basically optimizing all the routes. Now, I don't know if that's, a buzzword to raise more capital, but I think that's going to be huge. Interesting. What other companies are going to change a lot with automation? I think even though there's been a lot of inflation in the last couple of years, the overall trend over the next 30 years in most of the world and most of the Western world is going to be deflation because of birth rates and fertility, and how our generation is younger than our parents' generation and that kind of thing. All of that pushes overall prices down, and there's less and less of a workforce. And so I think a lot of stuff involving construction, a lot of stuff involving healthcare can totally be not only automated, but personalized. And so just like, okay, you talk to GPT after a while and you say, record these conversations and base some recommendations on that. Like, for example, I was teaching myself poker the other day, and I got GPT to write me a poker course, and then I showed them some of the things I did. I wrote it in and asked for some feedback and said, okay, remember this, recommend what I should keep doing afterwards. Well, you can very easily do that as a consultation with a doctor, as a consultation with a building contractor, and as technology, which is a deflationary force, it pushes prices lower and lower up to zero, then that will increase personalization. And whenever you have time saving and cost saving, there's an opportunity to have things that are more intricate. So yeah, but having an automated and personalized construction and healthcare system, which would be great. Like, for example, you can arrange your garden in any way you want. Mid-Journey AI can get you a picture design of anything you want designed in your garden within a realistic price, and all of a sudden that gets sent to digital architect. It automatically orders it, and print a nice fountain, 3D printed, and all of a sudden that's great. That relies on a high trust society where there's no interference by governments in terms of restricting these technologies, basically. So, for example, like healthcare, personalized supplements would be to, like, you do a general blood reading, you send it off, it tracks your nutritional deficiencies. Okay, here's a list of supplements that you can do that's personalized to you. Okay, and then you can do another blood test in a month and see if you've knocked out all of those deficiencies or hormonal imbalances or that sort of thing. That's fantastic. But I mean, like, Uber was also highly deflationary and efficient, and a lot of countries and governments have been trying to ban that because of taxi unions and that sort of thing. So just because a technology is better doesn't mean it's going to get implemented. So I can't make concrete predictions about what's going to happen.
Mm-hmm. No, it's extremely valuable. So it's very nice stuff, and you're giving like a well thought, unique angle as well. So, super nice. Now, on another side, I know you're like a big history fan as well. And if we talk about all the things we're talking about right now, we're mainly talking about the future. Selling a business, things like that. It's all about the future events. So, what kind of lessons do you take from your passion, if I can call that, from history into, like, your futuristic business approach?
It's so important. There's truly nothing new under the sun. And I think I've never understood why people aren't fascinated by history. Like, whenever, for example, I'm meeting someone new or on a date, and they just, like, they don't have any base curiosity. It's not as if people, like, know stuff. It's that it's fine not knowing stuff, but when you don't have a desire to know, I don't get that, and it's very confusing to me. But what people can learn from before, in almost every single thing you're doing, there'll be 10 people who have done a similar thing before you, and you can learn lessons from that. If I'd like to make a point about combining the future and the past, the way I view history is you almost have an AI data set where you can then put an algorithm together based on all the past predictions. Because how does a machine learning model work? It needs loads and loads and loads of data stacks. It takes those data stacks and then turns it into an algorithm. Well, that's how I view history learning. So basically, ironically enough, I was talking about buying a business and how you get to meter 80 out of a 100-meter race. Well, I view a similar thing with that when studying the past and studying the greats. because you can learn from their mistakes, learn from their successes, and almost skip ahead, leapfrog, and accelerate your progress from there.
So nice. Like you're basically giving the perspective of the history being data input for the future. That's very nice.
Yeah, exactly. You learn from
Okay,
it and
cool.
you
So
create an algorithm based on that.
Mhm. Yeah, it's actually very nice. Okay, cool. Now, one thing I want to kind of close off with as well is when we're talking about selling a business, it
Mhm.
seems that for a lot of people who are just starting out or they're not, familiar with this side of the business world, you could say, you kind of have a natural vision or, okay, I'm either in the stage of selling my business or I'm not there yet. Now, can you tell me what that look like? Like, should people approach building a startup, building a product, whether that's application or some sort of whatever SaaS product with the idea of selling it, or is it more that, hey, whatever you're doing, you should always have, that potential of selling in mind? Like, what is the best mindset as an entrepreneur to approach this?
I truly think you should always have your business as a sellable product because, as I said before, you know your own numbers better if you have everything there, bird's eye view. How would you pitch this to an investor? Because when you pitch it to an investor, it's all about the future growth. And it's all about not only that, it's a very laser eye focus on your cash return. And so then it removes a lot of your passion projects. So if you then treat that when talking to yourself about your business, then you're laser focused on your own cash return rather than, just stuff you think stuff is easy, and that sort of stuff. And then the second thing is basically that when you're operating a business and you know every facet of it, you know what's going badly, and you can basically adjust that accordingly. So I think those are the two main things that are super important, even if you're not selling it. And on top of that, one final point is that it is so much easier to delegate stuff when you're thinking about having your business as a sellable product. Because what would investors want? They want a package deal. They want something. The ideal investment is something that makes a lot of money with no work. And so if you can then structure your business around that, where it all of a sudden it's a well-oiled machine that operates without you, so you can hand it off to an investor at a much better margin, because if it's completely turnkey, then you can have a much better price for it. All of a sudden, you no longer need to run it yourself. And so then you can take a step back, okay? And so that's super important because that's going to save you so much time and give you so much more freedom, even if you don't sell it.
And that's very valuable for everyone because whether you're having that intention of not to sell it, that, building process of actually being able to structure your business, delegate and things like that is so important. So nice stuff. Now I have a final question for you. So since you're a pretty young guy yourself, you've seen the whole world, what is your vision kind of for like the best place to live? And what is, geographically for you the best location to be?
Yeah, totally. I've really come to the idea that I want to basically be a perpetual traveler. So your base should be somewhere where you can travel to a lot of different places from with ease. So good airport links, lots of countries nearby. Honestly, you've picked well in Poland because there's, so many it's cheap to live there. But on top of that, there's so many European countries you can visit, pretty much for cheap, super quick, and that sort of stuff. Yeah, I think in our current world, especially if you're an online entrepreneur, you really can be geographically separate from where your tax and your governmental structure operates. But I would say have somewhere that's easy to travel to the rest of the world to, somewhere that is business friendly, not just about taxes and incorporations and that sort of stuff, but a business friendly social environment where you're going to meet a lot of like-minded entrepreneurs and people who want to get stuff done in their life. You know, people who want to do something and be somebody, because that is, you know, massively underrated. Like, for example, if you go, you know, say there's some like random island with no one there that has 0% tax and you're all alone, it's going to be very difficult for you because you've got no competition and you've got no social environment where there's a lot of entrepreneurs, and that sort of stuff. And yeah, although I would say one point about your tax rate and stuff, do pick a place where even if there's the taxes are all right, make sure you can expense a lot of items in the country where you're incorporated in, because that really does make a difference. Because people talk about income tax all the time. Well, how about you just don't take any income because everything's expensible? You know, people don't think about
Right.
that, and they waste a lot of time talking about their taxes, where they should be just living their lives and outproducing the tax. You should be making a lot more money for taxes to even be relevant. So yeah, make sure you have the best social environment first, frankly, especially if you're a young guy starting out.
I think that's super valuable insight, man. And with that off, we can close it off. So I very much appreciate your being here. You give some wonderful perspectives. I genuinely think they're very invaluable. So thank you for being here, man.
Cheers. Thanks, Lauren. See you soon.